everybody. This is me. I'm a CDMP practitioner. So when we look at the certification levels, you'll see that's kind of the middle level. And the specialist exams that I passed were data governance and data quality. This is the DMBOK. We're currently on the V2 revised. It was revised a couple years ago, and they're currently working on the DMBOK V3. They haven't released a lot of information yet around how the CDMP will be updated to reflect the new version of the DMBOK. So I'm really hoping that we'll get more info about that in the next DAMA town hall. But what I imagine is going to happen is they'll release the DMBOK V3. They're targeting next year Q2, and it's going to be a minute before they actually update the CDMP exam itself. The truth is, if you're studying now for the CDMP, we always recommend people to take it within around 3 months of when they start studying, assuming that you can dedicate a reasonable amount of time, either each day or kind of a couple times a week to studying. 3 months is probably going to be your optimal duration for studying without forgetting what you learned in the beginning. It is cool that they're coming out with a new book, but for folks in this session, hopefully you guys are on your way studying or you're thinking about starting soon, and you'll take the current version of the CDMP exam with the DMBOK V2 revised. I will say if you currently own a copy of just the DMBOK V2, so the non-revised version, we have an article which is a walkthrough of the changes. If you scroll through this, you can see like they fixed a couple things, like some diagrams that had been mislabeled. The most significantly updated chapter was chapter 13, where they reordered some of the content. But you can still, using the information in this article to fill in the gaps, I would say you don't need to rush out and buy a new copy of the book for those that currently have just the regular V2. I don't know if that applies to anybody on the call, but if it does, then consider just taking it with what you have. As you probably know, all the CDMP exams are open book. So both the fundamentals level, which is kind of the first exam, and then the specialist exams, which are the deep dive exams, they're all 100 multiple choice questions, and they're all open book. But what that actually means is you can have one iteration of book. That means either the physical DMBOK or the ebook or your notes. So you can take notes in a book, but if you have notes separately, whether that's digital, like some people I know have taken them in a Word doc or an Excel sheet, or a physical notebook, either way, that counts as a separate resource book in this case. And so, for whatever reason, DAMA has stipulated that you can really only have one instance of book or one iteration of book. We always tell people to take notes in their ebook and use that as their resource for the exam. As you can see here, this is how we tell people to set it up. Think about your book device as your primary device because it's difficult to move your book to a different device and also keep your notes. Because of the DRM on the book, you will lose your notes if you try to transfer across devices. Your book needs to be on a separate machine, separate from the device where you'll be taking the test. That device could be a separate computer, so either a desktop or a laptop, or it could be an iPad or a Kindle. In fact, we have had people say that they've enjoyed using the Kindle as their e-reader, essentially, because it makes it really easy to take notes and navigate through your notes. So if you're comfortable with the Kindle app or the Kindle device, that could be a good option. The only other thing they say for the exam is that you should turn your Wi-Fi off on this device, and you should really only be accessing your DMBOK, which again should ideally be annotated. And then on a separate device, you'll use that to take the exam, and you need to have Chrome running on this device. It needs to be a computer, so either a desktop or a laptop, and it needs to have a webcam and the microphone on for the Honor Lock system to work. The exam is proctored by AI, essentially, so that's what Honor Lock is doing. And it'll, I think, kick it out to a human review if there's any kind of discrepancies that are noticed while you're taking the exam. But for the most part, people tend to have a good experience, and they just usually give you your score about 5 minutes after you've finished taking the exam. So yeah, frequently asked questions around the exam setup. Some people will ask, can I use an external monitor? Could I have the book on a monitor and then take the exam on my laptop? And the answer is no. The way that the Honor Lock plugin works is it detects whether you have an external monitor plugged in. So you really just need to have your computer running the exam. Honor Lock will freeze your window so you can't navigate off of the exam. And that's really all that you can use your computer for while you're taking the test. And then your DMBOK will be on a separate device. And that's really Honor code. So just turn off your Wi-Fi, just use the DMBOK. That's how the exam works. Another frequently asked question is like, how clean does my office need to be? It's fine if you have books on bookshelves or like a monitor that you're not using on your desk. You will show the exam environment when you're taking the honor lock verification before the exam. So if you show your environment and you just don't want to have open books on your desk, but just make sure you're in a quiet, closed environment where you won't be distracted. Yeah, otherwise, it's a very, very straightforward test. And we tell people you can use your physical book if you want, but typically, because the test is sometimes specifically about the wording in the DMBOK, it is really helpful to have the book as an ebook so you can use Control F. I did take it with my physical book the first time I took the CDMP, and I improved my score 10 points when I took it a second time with the ebook. That could be the difference between two levels, essentially. Yes, you can have two laptops, one with the exam and one with a Wi-Fi off that displays the book. So that would be like a perfect configuration. Thanks for that question. Okay, so now let's talk about the exam. The book costs about $95. I think that's for the physical copy. Once you have bought it, you have 12 months. That's not the way it used to be. It used to be unlimited time to take the CDMP, but DAMA realized there were a lot of people who signed up and then never actually took it. I'm gonna guess for those people, their work paid for them to have the voucher or to take the exam. And so they've started implementing this kind of 12-month cutoff. Like I said, our best practice is don't study for it for too long because it's really easy to lose motivation or to start to really get into this procrastination cycle and also forget what you learned when you started studying. So definitely set a rough deadline for yourself. You don't have to pick like the date and time that you take the exam or anything. You can be flexible because, again, the exam is AI proctored, so you can start it whenever you like. But do try to give yourself a time frame, a goal for when you're going to take the exam and don't just put it off indefinitely. So once you've bought the exam, you'll get access to your Brightspace platform. And for some reason, my CDMP Fundamentals exam has disappeared, but you can see the 3 specialist exams that I've taken, as well as the practice exam for the fundamentals level. For better or worse, only the fundamentals exam includes this practice. It is unfortunate because it would be great to see practice questions for the specialist exams as well, but they just give it to you for the fundamentals. I think someone mentioned this when they did their intro that they'd taken this practice test. You definitely want to do this practice test multiple times. The benefit of that is you'll see a handful of these questions again, actually, when you take the real exam. So I like to tell people if they're trying to maximize their score, if they're trying to get their best possible CDMP fundamental score, you should really be taking the practice exam until you're getting 100% correct every single time. And the reason is that when you see these questions again on the real test, not only will you answer it correctly, but you'll also answer it right away. And it guarantees you a right answer and you'll save time, which then if you need to research questions at the end, then you've saved time so you can use that for the more difficult questions. And then one other thing I wanted to say here, the DMF practice exam contains 40 practice questions, but it's from a test bank of 200 questions. So if you do this test repeatedly, then you'll see all the different questions. And that's another reason that it's important to take the practice exam multiple times. All right. So here are the different certification levels. For those that are preparing for the fundamentals exam, when you pass that, you'll get your CDMP associate level certification. The requirement to pass is a 60. So that's pretty straightforward. A lot of people will pass on their first try, which is great. And that's what happens when you take the first test. Now, if you'd like to advance your certification to the practitioner or the master level, you do need to take 2 specialist exams, and there's a minimum passing score that you need to attain on all 3 exams. So for the practitioner level, it's a passing score of 70 or above. And for a master, you need to get an 80% or above. And then there's also for the master a experience verification component. They will take a look at your resume and confirm that you have a minimum of 10 years of experience. That's the only time when they actually verify your experience. So for these other 2 levels, kind of just recommended, but you could take the exams at any point, even if you were just starting in your data management career. I did want to say also for the master level, they're pretty flexible about what they consider as data related experience. So if you worked as a software engineer or anything related to working with data, so that could be like an IT role, as well as obviously any kind of data related roles, that would count towards your 10 years. We can help guide you, but at the end of the day, of course, it's DAMA's decision what counts. What we know from hearsay, but it's the DAMA volunteers or DAMA board that kind of makes the decision. There used to be something called a CDMP fellow. I think they're changing this now, so it's now going to be called a DAMA fellow, which is probably good because it's more geared towards contributions to DAMA. So contributions to the DMBOK, contribution to the CDMP, etc. But there's only currently 3 people in the world who have this level. So yeah, maybe someone on this call one day will go on to attain this. But I think you have to be pretty involved with Dhamma, obviously, to be recognized as a fellow. All right, so let me check the chat and make sure that I got caught up. I think I explained this, but just for anybody who's joining or missed it, the master level experience needs to be data related. Not just work experience, but like work in technology more broadly. So it could be, yeah, anything related to tech, I think they would count. All right, moving on. Now let's talk about what's actually tested on this exam. So we mentioned the DMBOK. These are all the chapters of the DMBOK, at least the first 14 chapters. There's actually 3 chapters towards the end of the book which are not tested on the CDMP. They are still interesting, and to some extent, they are a little bit represented on the data governance specialist exam. There's one on data maturity assessments, and that one kind of has a couple questions on data governance specialist. But for the fundamentals, right, you guys just need to worry about the first 14 chapters. And the biggest thing I want to point out here is the average number of questions per chapter is highly differentiated across the chapters. So we have the really key important chapters, so the data governance, data quality, all the way down to data integration and interoperability. These are also your options for the specialist exam if you want to continue. And then you have these remaining chapters, which, yeah, they're still important. You'll still see questions on them. But if you wanted to de-emphasize studying these chapters, that could be a strategy, especially if you're just someone who you just care about getting that 60. You just want to pass the fundamentals, but you don't really need bragging rights or need to proceed to those practitioner or master levels. So if you're just trying to study in a short period of time and take it, then I would absolutely focus on these chapters, which collectively comprise 70% of the questions on the exam. Yeah, so kind of like a Pareto distribution, not exactly, but in that mindset of study smarter, not harder, really focus on these chapters when you're studying and reviewing the content. Okay, a couple more test preparation strategies. So, test preparation strategies. Practice answering your questions in around 54 seconds or less. That's a general guideline. In fact, if you are signed up for the English as a second language version of the exam, you'll get an extra 20 minutes to take the test. So that translates to an extra 12 seconds per question. Let me just show you really fast the ESL version of the exam because I feel like this is something that people get confused about sometimes. So when you're going to purchase the exam and or redeem your voucher that you bought from us, you can buy the standard exam. This is for your native English language speakers. But if you did learn English not as your native language, then absolutely purchase this ESL version. This gives you an additional 20 minutes on the test. It would be awesome if they showed you a bit more info about this. I also heard from someone that if you're dyslexic, that you can also enroll in the ESL version. But anyway, just to go back to this really quick. So if you do get the ESL, it does give you access to a translator plugin as well. So extra 20 minutes, and you can use the Google Translate tool. And then the certificate that you get at the end is the exact same as if you took the regular exam. So totally take advantage of this if this applies to you. Okay, so going back to our guidelines here, the reason I say practice with a timer is so that you can guarantee yourself that you will have extra time at the end of the test. So basically, if you forget everything else that I have said during this presentation, I want you to remember when you sit down to take the exam, your number one goal needs to be to get to the end of the exam with time left. And the reason I say that is just like the way the exam is structured. It's multiple choice and there's no penalty for getting a wrong answer. So if you guessed blindly on every single question on this test, on average, statistically speaking, you would get around a 20% or a score of 20 out of 100 just because choose the single best answer out of 5. But every time you leave a question blank, then you're guaranteed to get that question wrong. So you absolutely need to make sure that you get to the end of the exam with every single question answered. So that brings us to our second test prep strategy, which is guess. Even if you don't know the answer, eliminate the obviously wrong answers and guess. That way, you'll guarantee that you get to the end, and then if you have more time, you can go back and look stuff up with the book and hopefully improve your score. But you should, under no circumstances, leave a question blank. And also, another thing is once your time runs out, so again, 90 minutes for our English language speakers or 110 minutes for everyone else, the exam will automatically submit. So, no worries about you don't have to be cognizant of how you're doing. Really, you just need to focus on answering the questions to the best of your ability. And we always tell people to use their full time. Let that exam auto submit at the end of your time because you could always be checking your answers or doing some more research in the book, etc. You just really want to make sure you use all your time because you would be really mad at yourself if you scored like a 59 or a 69 or 79 and you missed getting to the next level because of 1 point. And maybe if you had spent all of your time taking the exam, you could have answered that correctly. The other thing that is kind of important in terms of your test taking strategy and like your layout is that you should have a piece of blank paper with you. DAMA has allowed this. This is exactly how the real exam is set up as well. So you'll get the questions in blocks of 5, and there is no way to flag a question. So let's say I guessed on question 1, but I wasn't sure. On the old test taking platform, you used to be able to click a button and essentially flag the question for later review. And so to keep the exam fair, since they switched to this new platform that doesn't have the flag, DAMA encourages you to write down the number of the question if you are flagging it. So they ask that on that piece of paper, you're only writing down question numbers. It goes hand in hand with guessing throughout. So if you do guess or you feel unsure about the answer that you've selected, then do write that number on the piece of paper. Okay, so then there was a question around, do all the questions come from the book? The answer is going to be most of them, but not all of them. So we actually feel like it's probably around 80% of the questions that come from the DMBOK. So 80% that can be answered with Control F. There's probably 10% that are using the concepts from the book, but are asking you to make deductions or inferences in order to answer the question. Then the remaining 10% are going to be, sorry, I was just thinking about how bad I am at math. So remaining 10% going to be from your own experience as a data practitioner, outside knowledge or new stuff that's come around since the DMBOK was released. Yeah, so those more difficult questions are considered to be like your master level questions, and there's only around 10% of them on the fundamentals exam. Okay, I promise I'm much better at data management than I am at math. Okay, so there was another question around the order of the questions. So what's kind of funny is when I took the test and I retook it last summer, I felt like the questions were coming in batches, but the batch order was random. So I would get 4 or 5 questions on, let's say, chapter 6. And then I'd get 2 or 3 questions on chapter 2. And then a couple more questions on chapter 12 or whatever. It wasn't like I saw all the questions for each chapter at once, but they did feel like they were batched for some reason. But then the batches themselves were out of order. So I don't know. That seems like, I don't know if that was just like a weird coincidence or what. But they definitely will come to some extent out of order. So it's not like you're going to see your 2 questions for chapter 1 and then your 2 questions for chapter 2 and then 11 for chapter 3. No, it's going to be to some extent mixed. So one test taking skill is definitely identifying in which chapter the question that you're on is referencing. That's going to be really helpful for you if you need to review the DMBOK in order to answer it. Okay, so it's mostly random. And then scenario-based questions, I think you'll see a handful, not as many. Like the specialist exams are way more geared towards the scenario-based questions. You can kind of see here, let's see, this is a definitional question. There's only a handful of scenario questions. Doing the practice exam is pretty much reflective of the difficulties that you'll see when you take the real test. So hopefully that helps answer that question. Okay, some more advice. We tell people to make a log of questions as they're preparing. So when you're doing the practice exams, when you're doing the question sets from Data Strategy Pros, or if you made questions with your buddies, write down like which ones you are struggling with and make sure you go back to the book and reread those sections where you feel a little bit less confident about your responses. Because at some point, preparing for any standardized test, you're going to need to really focus on shoring up your weaknesses, and that's how you're going to attain your optimal score. Final thing is just make sure that you're in a good headspace for taking the exam. So whatever that looks like for you, well rested, but also energized, also relaxed. It's only 90 or 110 minutes, so not super long, but just all the obvious stuff, like make sure you ate or use the bathroom before, and in a distraction-free environment to sit for the exam. Okay, so last set of rapid fire advice, test taking tips. These are all really straightforward. So I came up with this based on taking other standardized tests as well. So like the GMAT, GRE, SAT, etc. Ideally, if you look at this list, this is not just helpful for the CDMP, but for any kind of professional certification that's multiple choice. First one, trust your instincts. Don't change your guessed answer unless you find compelling evidence that your guess is wrong. A lot of times, your intuition, your subconscious will point you towards the correct answer. Don't just change your answer because you are second guessing yourself. You're often correct the first time when you guess. Now, of course, if you look at the book and you see a direct sentence that contradicts what you selected and you find another answer which is best according to the book, that's really the only time when I would change my answer. Or you misread the question, or there's a couple other reasons why you might change it, but in general, try not to change once you've guessed. Okay, next thing is to look out for absolutes. These are your words like always, never, only, every, must, or like any time. These often indicate wrong answer choices because the correct answer with data, consulting, life pretty much is it depends. So just keep that in mind as you are making your selections and eliminations. Also, look out for negation. So when we do practice questions, we try to always capitalize the words not, except, at least, etc. But on the CDMP, it just depends on the whim of the question writer. Sometimes you'll have these capitalized, sometimes you won't. Definitely make sure that you're looking out for them as you're taking the test because it would be a shame to answer a question that you just misunderstood. Before you guess, try to cross off your clearly incorrect answers. I would be way more skeptical of answer choices that included your absolutes as part of this. So it could be correct, but it's way less likely to be correct. So, yeah, we talked about time management. Again, this is my number one tip for you all. Make sure that you're answering every question in under a minute. That'll guarantee you time at the end of the exam and answer every question. So, whether that's guessing or whatever, you have a fairly decent chance of getting a question right, even if you guess. Hopefully, this was helpful for you all when you're sitting for the test. And then Mani asked, can I use Google Translate during the exam? I haven't ever taken an ESL exam, but my understanding is you are allowed to use the Google Translate plugin. So again, you need to use the Chrome browser, you'll have the honor lock, and it'll allow you to have access to that plugin. So someone who has taken ESL, come back and report how that works, but that's my understanding of it. They are considering translating the CDMP, so we'll see if they can do that. They have a lot that they're working on right now. But yeah, for now, that's why they'll let you use the translate is to kind of make it equal because they know not everybody who works in data is also speaking English or working in English. So they try to level the playing field a little bit. All right. So yeah, as I mentioned, they are coming out with a new version of the DMBOK. They're totally reimagining this. We'll see how everything looks at the end of this process. As I said, it's due out in Q2 of next year. I think they're done with surveys, but they are doing town halls. They're supposed to be every quarter. So I just checked the events page. Let me show you. So if you go to damadmbok.org/events, that's where you can see the upcoming town hall, which they don't have scheduled yet. So I'm hoping they'll have one in April. My plan is to really try to push them on articulating what their goals are for the CDMP because they haven't stated the plan for updating the exam. But anyway, you can see the recordings of the previous events and also the decks that they used. They are being fairly transparent with how the process is taking place. And you can also kind of get involved with the various focus groups and engagement as well. So anyway, just something to be aware of. But like I said, ideally you guys all take the CDMP well before the new book comes out anyway. So yeah, so that's it. I will stop sharing. I know we had a couple people who joined, and I apologize again for pausing the intros, but I did want to make sure that I answered all of y'all's questions. Okay, so JM asked about the specialist exams. I think your best bet as your one book is still going to be the DMBOK. The specialist exams are very different beast than the fundamentals exam. They are much harder to prepare for because we don't really have a clear picture of what is going to be on the test. And so we do recommend people do some outside reading just so they're brushing up on the subject area. And we tell people to focus on the Dhamma thought leaders. But in terms of like your one book, you definitely want to have the DMBOK. In fact, I took the data governance exam. I was like, I'm going to take it with John Ladley's data governance book. And yeah, I barely looked at it. I really wish that I'd had the DMBOK because I just felt like that would have been a lot more helpful. I still got a master level pass, but I'm just saying always use the DMBOK as your book. The specialist exams are like much more of a wild card versus, like I said, with fundamentals, 80% of the content is really control Fable from the DMBOK. Do you guys have any other questions? Okay. Takura asks, how hard is it to score a master level? I think it's pretty straightforward. I mean, I can only really speak to my experience. We do not collect data actually around our community members who passes at what level, but I can say like the test, again, it's 100 multiple choice, so you need to score at least 80 questions correct, 80 or above to get the master level. And from my experience, like when I first sat for the CDMP in 2020, I was coming in as a data scientist. So I had no background on data management whatsoever. The only content that I knew for the exam was like the 2% kind of on big data and data science. So I actually read the DMBOK twice, which is part of why I wanted to found the company because there really weren't cost-effective resources at the time. And I was like, I feel like studying for this exam could be a lot easier if I actually knew how to set it up to begin with. Anyway, so after I read the book twice, I sat for the exam and I scored an 82. So that is a master level pass, but it is also right on the cusp. It wasn't a really super awesome master level pass. Like I retook the exam last summer and I scored a 92, which is again, I think the big difference for me was the ebook. That is what helped push me into the 90s. So definitely recommend using Control F and practicing with the PDF. Yeah, but we don't have data about the distribution of how people score. And I think that's what you were asking about with the averages. Okay, the other thing I guess I'll say is on the cdmp.info, you can see the number of people who have attained each level. This is really cool. Like the number of associates has gone up a ton since I started teaching the exam in 2020, 2021. And there's around almost, I guess, 1,300, almost 1,400 practitioners. And then the master level has remained quite small, only 400 people. So again, this refers to the certification level, not the score on the fundamentals exam. But yeah, just to give you a sense. So for those that are looking for master, you are joining kind of an elite group if you do attain that level. Okay, so then Abdul asked, if you make a summary of each chapter in a separate file and then merge it into the DMBOK V2 before the exam, would it be considered a single doc? Honestly, yeah, I think it would. So if you had one PDF, which is the DMBOK plus your notes, essentially, from my standpoint, again, I'm not Dama, I'm not the decider, but I think that would fit the letter of the law in terms of they want you to use one resource. Yeah, I really appreciate you guys joining. Thank you so much for everybody who asked questions. They were awesome. So, yeah, thanks again for coming. I we're going to say bye. All right. Thanks again, y'all.